Recording. And we are live. Welcome back to the RINO podcast. And if you, like me, think that tariffs are not a good idea, apparently now you're a RINO. This is the shit. This is literally why we named the podcast this. Because basic Republican things like low taxes, economic growth, not tariffs, and you get called, and like people who want tariffs are usually protectionist Democrats, and then when you say no, they call you a RINO. So where we're at? How's your 401k? You're still young. You contributing to a 401k?
I am a millennial, so it's not. I actually, when this happened, I was like, you know what? Been
I
through this.
I've been this. Here's
Not
the thing.
my first rodeo, I guess.
I mean, I get people are freaking out, but we've had this before, right? So like I am in the 20th century, there were two stock market crashes, 1929 and 1987. I was 11 years old in 1987, so I don't really remember that. I just vaguely remember it, everybody freaking out.
I
Uh,
remember. I remember.
but
I remember the one that when I was in college.
right, so when I first got out of college, I remember the dot-com bubble bursting because I actually worked at a dot-com. Survived that. Then the financial crisis of 2008. Survived that. COVID crash of 2020. Survived
The,
that. So it's just
the
like this.
financial crisis of 2008, I think, actually scared me more than really
Yeah.
COVID
Yeah.
or this.
The,
Sorry,
no, but what most of those are
because I think there
caused
were
by.
right, there was real structural failures there that I think were like the thing is like after 9/11 I mean, and 9/11 was a very scary day for me because I watched everything and that was pretty traumatic. Um, but there was like a recession afterward, obviously, because people were scared and they didn't buy anything for a long time. Only like my parents went into
Well, yeah,
prepper
if
mode.
you
Um,
might not have been old enough to remember this, but after that was like right after the dot-com bust. It
yeah.
was right around that time. So there was more factors at play than just 9/11. There were some strong economic factors. Um, but this time around, you know, I I'm going to say this to start. I don't know that Donald Trump doesn't think that tariffs are an actually good thing. There is a more it's more than 50% that he thinks no, tariffs actually work.
Yeah, no, no, he's
uh,
always had this personal opinion. He has
and
always thought that tariffs, but he always thought that the economic principle behind them really, really does work. I mean, I personally think of them as a negotiating tool because the leverage is the size of our GDP versus in other countries, right?
right.
Like that would be the lever and our military budget.
Yeah.
It's the same as Reagan kind of using our leverage as a superpower against the Soviet Union. We have that leverage economically against other countries. And so if we levied tariffs against, like you are seeing this now, I will say that you are seeing this against like South Korea and Vietnam. Not well, I don't know what they're really doing with Vietnam because again, the messaging is all crazy all over the place. But like South Korea
Don't
and
even bother. It's gonna change tomorrow. Like so I don't know if we can get into specific examples like as of this minute when we're broadcasting at 8:41 p.m. on the
But
East
like
Coast.
ultimately the goal, I mean, you and I would be that there's free trade. I do have to say that I'm probably an 80% free trader, because I do think that there are things for national defense and national security that should be made in the United States.
A lot.
And that's the reason why I'm an 80 percenter.
So
I agree with the concept 80% of the time. I just think that things like, I don't know, um, anything aligned with defense. And again, there are some supply chain stuffs that I think that should
Hmm.
be for national security.
Of course. And the problem you get into is when people expand that bubble to things that aren't really national security related. But one thing I will agree with Trump on, which I hope ends up being the case. I don't know if it will because he thinks tariffs are a good thing, and if you listen, we'll get into Navarro in a second, who's like, no, we're just doing tariffs. It's like they're not a negotiating tool to get no tariffs and lower trade barriers. No, no,
I mean,
no, tariffs. Everybody else should pay
yeah,
our
I
taxes. It's
am
like
kind
whoa,
of glad that Elon Musk came out
yeah,
and
called him.
really ripped him a new one on
Okay.
Twitter today. That was
Side
pretty
note.
fun.
Before I get to my point, there's no coming back from Peter Retardo. You're done.
Yeah, like
He
that.
stuffed you in the locker and
Yeah.
and put you in
Well,
there,
I mean,
and
like
you are done.
even well, the thing is like, look, like even if you want to get out down to like what Elon Musk has produced as an innovator and somebody who's been in this industry, like he's Tesla is on the front line of electric vehicles. SpaceX is doing better work in aerospace than even NASA is, let's be
Mm-hmm.
real.
Mm-hmm.
Because the way that they are able to recycle rocket engines now is like
Yeah.
incredible. That's just so, and obviously everybody who works under Elon at SpaceX deserves the credit for engineering that. But at the same time, he's the head of these companies, and Peter Navarro is
Yeah.
like what?
No, he's well. I think
Like
Elon said it best. He's got a PhD from in economics from Harvard, and that's a bad thing, right?
I
It's just
mean,
like there's a lot of
that
bad.
sounds like a lot of Ivy League talk that is above my head, but I
No,
generally am not a huge fan of anybody from Harvard.
a
So
lot of
let's,
bad ideas come out of the
there's a
economics
lot of
department
bad
of Harvard.
ideas coming from Harvard.
Look, the idea behind not just tariffs but lowering trade barriers, silly little rules like when we did the Patreon tariff episode, we'll not try not to repeat too much of that, but when you went to Canada and they wouldn't let in the cheese, right?
Yeah,
Okay, there's stuff like that that
there's a
needs to
lot.
go away. That's not a tariff. They're just not letting in American
And
cheese.
there's a lot
So
of, I mean, there's a lot of trade barriers that people don't even realize
yeah.
within regulations that we have in this country. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that I've talked about my niche political issue is sunscreen FDA sunscreen UV
Mm-hmm.
filters, and we don't allow new and better tech out of Asia and Australia. Australia has a government office all the way to do UV testing, which is like it's incredible, and we don't allow their sunscreens in the United States. That's a trade barrier.
So,
And
but this is the point. If we get to this, if the tariffs spur on,
and
get
we're
us way
again,
closer to
you and
actual,
I, we are anti a lot of regulations that are
yeah,
unnecessary. Like
absolutely.
we're
But you have a situation where why can't we get a lot of our cars into Europe? Well, because they set up rules that are designed to keep our cars out. Like
And
and I
if you
heard
go to Europe, I will say a lot of our cars that are made here, even if they are Japanese or Asian cars, they would never be able to drive around in Europe because the way that
I
they build the roads are tiny.
I have a
Um,
feeling we could sell a lot of Ram pickups and F-150s to the working class people of Europe. I guarantee. I'm telling you.
I
I
bet a lot of
guarantee it.
people in Eastern Europe would
Yeah,
buy our trucks
but we
if we
can't do
could
it
actually
because
sell them there.
but there are rules in place that prevent us from going in there. It's not just tariffs. So it's not a zero. It's not even a zero for zero thing. That would be good. They get those trade barriers have to come down. So
And the EU has a lot of them on the
right,
United States.
right. So
And we have them on the EU with beauty products. So there's my gripe. So.
so right then and there, we're not in a state of free trade. Like all things being equal, as of this
No.
moment, with all those barriers in place in Europe, and you not being able to bring your cheese into Canada, and
The
all
Canadians are like really picky over these kind of things. I have to say, like, it's one of the things where like it's like for me with Canada and their gripes, it's like, no, man, like
but
you have a tariff quota like on dairy products to protect your dairy farmers in Canada. Like we can't even sell our milk or
yeah,
even the
it's
organic stuff. I'm not even talking about like
it's
the crazy, whatever.
so they do this, and this came out. the new MAGA talking point be like, well, other countries have tariffs, and they think it's good. It's like they're
But what's
engaging
the
in
end game?
protectionism.
So, right. Like what's the end game,
Yeah,
MAGA? Like that's the thing. Like so if the point is that they have tariffs, so we should place tariffs on them, what is the point? Like if the point is to have them, okay, say such. But what's the end game? So is the end game down to zero? Like I want the end
yeah.
game down to
I
zero.
want
And this is the
and the
reason
rules.
why Peter Navarro, being like an idiot in every single interview he's been on, I mean, like, really, what spooked the Asian markets is Peter Navarro's rhetoric. And that's, when it on Sunday night when we were
Hmm.
Asian markets opened and in Japan and you know, I don't care about China. I'm going to be straightforward. I care
Yeah,
about everybody else. Because
and
we
that's
don't
fair.
think other markets, in order to go after Canada or not Canada, well, Canada, especially with those kind of tariffs, but like China. China is my big deal. China, throughout all of this, and especially today when you see like their currency is dropping, oil is dropping. Oil, oil dropping actually screws the Russians, so I actually was not
Hmm.
angry
That
for oil
happens too. Yep.
dropping. But I do worry about like the other Asian markets like South Korea and Japan because those are allies. But they're also the ones that are coming to the table first, and that's a good thing.
And that's the point. And I think as Republicans, we're all in agreement that if at the end of the day this leads to way better deals, trade
Which
barriers
I
coming
think
down,
I think it
zero
will
tariffs,
with a lot
that's
of
thing. But if
countries. If Secretary Bessent is in charge, not Peter Navarro.
mhm. and it's just as straightforward as that. And there's no coming back if these tariffs stay in place because then things will become rigid. Commerce doesn't move as easily. If you import $500,000 worth of, I don't know, German bratwurst, and you already paid $500,000 for it, and then all of a sudden it arrives in port, and now you have to pay what 25% more just because when
Well,
it hits the shores, it's like, okay, you didn't
everybody
plan
here
on that,
knows my
and
opinion on the country of Germany,
well,
but
but you get my point. It's like you can't you that is a
a
tax.
25% tariff on Germany, I don't know.
No, but
I'm only half joking here, but maybe.
the
Worst country in Europe, awful people, you know how I feel about this country.
I don't know
They're
if
still they're still bad. Sorry, I'll double down. Let me go on a
the
rant.
point being is they run protectionist. They have protectionist policies on their industries at the expense of their citizens getting our possible goods, and that just needs to end.
It is true.
And if
And
that
the thing
ends,
is
then
that they argue a lot of cultural reasons for that. I do have to agree with some of the European argument, though, having been spent time in Europe, not to be bragging about my travel and my life experience. I mean, the food is just better in Europe because in the United States, this is a side rant. I mean, we just overprocess a lot of food, and
we
in
do,
Europe
yeah.
they don't, and so it tastes better, and so they don't want our American food, and that's one of the reasons
But
why
that's fine. But
Robert
that's a market.
Kennedy
But
Jr. is popular right now, which is
but
not
that's a
always.
market. That's a market thing. If we wanted to sell in there and be like, nobody's buying over
But we
here.
can't, but we also can't sell there. That's the other part.
Yeah.
Like our food is not going there. They raise those trade
But
barriers in order to not sell our food there on purpose.
there's a lot of other products that we make that we could get in there if possible. That's why trade is a good thing. And
But
that's
they
why trade
also, I'm going to point out something about Europe that people also don't know about the VAT tax. They use the VAT tax as a luxury tax in Europe in order to keep people within their own countries to not buy luxury items. But if you are an American, you are incentivized to go to Europe and actually spend
yeah.
on luxury items because you have to initially pay the VAT, but you can get it back.
How do you get it
You
back?
you go through the airport and you can get cash.
I did not know that.
So if you go to France, like if you wanted, okay. I'll go through it,
You got
girl
to go
math.
through this quick. Go through.
I'll
I'm
go
not.
through it. I'll go through the girl math of it right now. So if you wanted to go to France and buy a pair of Chanel ballerinas, and right
Yeah,
now they're running about $900, which is $400 more than the first time I ever bought a
yeah,
pair.
it's top of my list.
Crazy, by the way, side brand. Um, you pay a VAT tax on it, and I think the last time I paid it, I think it was like $100 on a pair of Chanel ballerinas. I think this was like 3 years ago when I was in Paris. When I was leaving, what I did, and I had to fly through Heathrow, and at that point, I could still get the VAT tax through Heathrow back. You have to go to like a kiosk, bring all of your receipts, and they give you that money back. They can
No
do it in
kidding.
cash. I've done this several times. I did it in Spain, I did it in France. My husband actually messed up the last time we did it. Um, you should have let me do it. But yeah, you get that money back.
Oh, cool.
They incentivize Americans to come over there and spend on luxury goods.
All right.
Yep. And people
I,
who say they want to bring that here, absolutely not. No.
look, I'm not a nervous Nelly. I'm not a panican. Right? Is that what did I say it right?
I don't feel, the thing is, I don't feel like I'm a panikin either. I just want to hear a plan.
But here's the funny
Am
part
I?
about this. He
That's not
can't. Here's
panicking.
the
I
thing.
just
But
need to
time
hear
out.
the plan.
Time out. He can't actually reveal this as a plan if it is a plan. Now,
But can't he?
he's
Like,
sort
that's
of
the
the
thing,
only
right?
way this here's the thing. I'm not saying this won't happen because there's a decent likelihood it will happen. The only way he fucks this up, Trump, is if a lot of tariffs still stay in place 6 months from now and there's massive tariffs everywhere. And he's like, no, I really like the tariffs, so we're going to collect a lot of money. That's the only way he fucks this up. If he keeps this going for a little bit, works out a bunch of deals with a bunch of different countries, lowers trade barriers, zero for zero, and the rules come down, he can just go declare victory. But he can't say that's his plan now. Because if he says that's his plan, then the threat of the tariffs actually have no teeth. He's got to act like, no, I really now is it an act? This is like
But at the same time, you
this
can
is like,
say, I'm sorry, but the tariffs are staying in place until we renegotiate this trade deal. Like,
but even if you say
or like,
even
let's say it's with Japan, right? And then
so he's
on
hinted,
autumn,
but
he's hinted at
he's hinted at that he wants to make a deal. So I think he's leaning in that direction. But at the
with
same
China, I don't
time,
want any deal. I'm going to
well,
be straightforward. I don't want any deals made with China.
they'll break the
My
deals
thing
anyway.
is that
They're so shitty they'll break the deals anyway. We can go with everybody else.
right. No, my thing on it is I don't want deals with any other. I don't want deals with China. Okay? Like they are going to invade Taiwan. That is what I think that they are going to do.
Yeah.
I think that we do not need to fund anymore their plans to invade Taiwan, which is essentially what we're doing with all of our trade with them. We're enriching their company or country. And what China does is, and this is what people do not understand, they export a lot of goods to us. Do they import a lot of goods into China, Jeff?
No, none.
No, they
None.
don't. They actually steal the tech and then they counterfeit
Yeah,
it.
no, there's no
Okay?
point.
This is
There's
the
no
reason
point
why
working for
Apple
them.
wants to leave China.
They're a bunch of thieves. Look,
Yes.
they've done this. Because it's a centrally planned economy, they would do things like create steel mills and produce steel and like so much fucking steel, and then they would just dump it on the market and like try to crash the steel market here. They did this over the past few decades. They'd overproduce because it's a command economy. They don't have any concept of market demand, so they just fucking make stuff. And the ghost cities, they just build
That's the reason why
thousands
I
and thousands
don't
of buildings that are now
understand.
sitting empty. They're all
Yes.
sitting empty, and they're beautiful buildings, but no one.
This is the
But
reason why I don't understand the concept of people acting like they're going to somehow overtake the United States. Like they're not going to.
they're not.
Then the reason
No,
why is because they fuck around with the economy and they can't even understand how to really, I don't
no,
know,
they
do
don't know how to run
when
accounting.
you
They know how to copy things and make things look like they know what they're doing, which they don't. Now, to your point earlier, we need to get all the chips that we possibly make in Taiwan. the fuck out of there. Okay. So
It is.
it is
Um,
a
it is a
major,
scary
yes.
situation over in Taiwan because China is being super aggressive and it's an island.
They
So like that's the other thing that people don't understand. So defending an island would, if you're talking about like a military invasion, is going to be very hard. Um, and
they
unless we have carriers in the area, which we might have to if they get super aggressive, and then
they
you'll
do
have
war
people crying
games. Yeah.
about our aircraft
They
carriers
do
being moved.
they do war games about 4 times apparently 3 4 times a year around
Yeah,
town. China does.
I read a piece on the last one.
Yeah.
It's tough and it's going to be horrific. I think it's actually going to be scarier than the invasion of Ukraine. And the invasion of Ukraine was
Yeah.
pretty scary when it happened.
Well, I'll tell you, if we can get, it will crash global markets if that happens. That will actually be a real long lasting crash that won't recover or bounce, because that'll keep going down, because they make the chips that they make,
People better get used
semiconductors.
to this happening. And that's another point I'm trying to make on Twitter. I was like, guys, no, no, no. Like an economic decoupling from China is going to happen, whether we like it or not, within the probably the next
Yeah.
years.
The
Because they're going in. They want Taiwan.
yeah.
They've
I
made the plans.
I think I'm not gonna say I was wrong about Putin and Ukraine, but we saw how Ukraine turned out for Putin. It didn't go like he planned. I don't think it'll go like the Chinese plan either. The other thing
Who was right about the invasion of Ukraine, Jeff?
you were.
I'm smiling, but it's not funny.
Yeah,
Like
no, you got it. I thought he backed down, but no, it was wrong.
he put too much stuff on the border in order to back
Yeah,
down. And the thing is like he's an ideological psychopath. Z is very similar. He's just a little bit more patient. And it is scary. Like you know what's happening right now with the 104 tariffs that are going into effect tonight at midnight on China. I think the market's kind of already priced this in. I hate to say it. They know that the economic decoupling is going to come,
it,
whether you like it or
yeah.
not,
It'll
sooner or
be
later. So they have been quietly pricing it in for a while. The problem is that we still do have a lot of production in China left over that we have not moved over because moving production takes time. And I don't know how that's going to go tonight. I don't think that we should let up on China. My thing on Trump is that he does things like this. And then he says, "Oh, we'll be easy on them on the tail end." I don't want you to be easy on China. Like I don't like they unleashed a pandemic on the world. They're
mhm.
aggressive on an ally. I mean, Taiwan is a country. I don't want Trump to be easy on China. I don't think that being easy on China is going to be an incentive to stop them from being aggressive in the South Pacific. Um, and I think that we need to strengthen those ties. I do think that this is a way that we can strengthen ties with especially Japan and South Korea and other nations around that area in order to make sure that we have free trade with them and make sure that production goes up in those countries and we can move production out of China. The other point that I made online recently is that any manufacturing that's going to come back to the United States is going to the American South, and everyone needs to be mentally prepared for that as well. It's not going to Pennsylvania. It is not going to Michigan. It is not going to the Midwest. It is going to the
And
American South
why?
because it is cheap and the unions are not as shitty.
Yeah, that's it.
So those are the big ones. In the American South, I mean, a lot of people don't really know or anything like that. When we're talking about car production, the biggest Toyota plant in the world is actually in Kentucky. Um,
I did not know
Georgetown.
that.
Yeah, it's in Georgetown, Kentucky. I think they make one of the trucks. I know that my Corolla was actually made in Indiana.
Yeah, no, they
But
make Tennessee, Indiana, and I guess Kentucky. Yeah.
yeah, they make I think the Tundra or the Tacoma in Kentucky. and it is the largest in the world. Not really super unionized. It's not like, Pennsylvania factories or Michigan factories. In Alabama, right, Mr. Caitlin? I think there's Mercedes-Benz and BMW,
Yeah, we
correct?
we did a lot of that.
Yep. I'm getting a thumbs up. Mercedes-Benz, he would know because he's an engineer. Um, Mercedes-Benz is in Alabama. That's where their car plant for the United States is. Because again, in Germany, they have a ton of regulations, and a car made in Germany is not going to be able to drive in the United States. So they have to make it in the United States. And that is produced there. Anything that comes back to the United States, manufacturing wise, it's just going down south. The
Yeah,
standard of living in the South is so much cheaper than the Midwest and New England. It's just not
yeah, it's
even.
not happening. It's not happening there. I have to ask well, a few more points before we wrap up on this. I'm more. I mean, I think it's a crapshoot. It's 50-50
It's high
um,
risk, high reward.
if Trump is gonna actually make deals or go with Peter Retardo and stick with the tariffs. I don't know I genuinely don't know which one he'll do. But at the same time, like I said before, he can't show his hand if he is actually willing to make the deals. He has to act like no, we really love tariffs and it's all just a head fake. And you know what? I think a lot of pundits who aren't big fans of Trump, and sometimes I'm not, and this really just depends how we'll know in a few months. If it was a head fake and he had to act like he was really sticking to the tariffs, but he makes all much better deals and all the barriers and tariff zero for zero and barriers come down, he will look like a fucking genius. But again, if it's 50-50, because if he
Well, I
doesn't,
mean,
because if he
it's a
doesn't, this is bad, and he's doing it at the right time. It's April of his first year. By the midterms, if this works, it'll be a distant memory. I mean that.
you look at it today, right? So like today, Sunday night was actually pretty scary, and yesterday was pretty bad if you're
Yeah,
watching stocks. And again, I don't watch stocks pretty closely, because I have a life. And um,
you should watch. Let me give you some advice.
oh my God.
Watch your stocks closely.
I don't watch my stocks closely because again, like if I watch my stocks closely, like I would be more likely to sell all the time, and I don't know if I would do that. I actually am a more of a long game person. If I'm looking at things,
The,
that's how I've always been.
your old pal Jeff has some advice for those listening. Okay, if it's a company that's been around for you, well, here's the number one rule: if it doubles, sell half immediately, always and every single time, because that's happened a few times. When it doubles, you sell half always. That way, you never lose a nickel. Also, the 20% rule. If you make 20% on a stock within a short period of time, you're really unless it's even then you should try to sell a little bit and make some money on that, because you put it in the bank, you're making what 6-7% in a savings account. Like 20% is a pretty damn good return.
Yeah.
Take your winnings, but other than that, then just go with an index fund if you're not up for it. If you're not like don't day trade. You can't beat the market that way. But if you are lucky enough, because I've lost money on stocks, most of my, I would say more than half of the shit I own before this correction, was down because I picked wrong and I timed wrong. But it evened out with the stuff that I got right. So who the hell knows?
I mean, again, yesterday was pretty scary on the stock market, and I think yeah, yesterday, and again, this is all based off of what they're saying. Like the market is being spooked by what President Trump is saying. It is quote
Mm-hmm.
unquote inflected. And Peter Navarro, who's again being a fucking idiot.
And you know who I don't,
And I will say that the market went up today because of
but
Elon Musk tweet that Peter
But
farm
then
was on.
it went back down. Like
It
when
went
Besant was indicating that there's a deals on the table, went up, and then it went. You shouldn't. I think Damon Toll, he had a good tweet. It's like you shouldn't brag about the stock market going up in the morning
That's true.
because in the fucking afternoon it will
It
bite you
did
in the
end up.
ass.
I think it ended up going back down when they announced the
Yeah,
100 war on China. Um,
I have been thinking that this market. I've had a fair amount of cash on the sidelines because I have always thought that this market is overvalued with the amount of cash that Biden pumped into the economy,
it is
where
overvalued.
it was
That's the
going.
other
Yeah,
part of this that
that's
like people don't
yeah.
really understand. I'm like, dude, we still have a ton of
No,
liquid in the market right now.
I'm I'm
We're not
waiting.
pulling it out the way that we should. That's the reason why inflation is still persisting, is because there's
Yeah,
still a ton of liquid out
yeah,
there.
and I think it'll go down a little bit more, and then I
And that's
think
the reason why they're not decreasing interest rates, by the way.
yeah, which is
Like
what Trump
they're holding them strong on
which
purpose.
is what Trump's want. Which is what Trump wants. Now, I think a trade war when you're in a weak position is the stupidest thing you can do. But I think he might pull it off with our allies or our neutral countries. China, I don't know how that plays out. It'll be interesting to see. I'm going to say though, it is much easier to fight a trade war if you have your own fiscal house in order, if you're not running $2 trillion deficits, if you don't have $36 trillion in debt, if you don't have those elements,
I mean, I do have to
you can
say
fight a
them
trade
kind of
war.
they do. I'm hoping that China starts unloading our debt, which I've heard that they might be doing
They yeah.
which would be good for us, FYI, people. China unloading our debt would be absolutely good because we'd be able to buy it back, which is
I
we
guess
want that
us
to
owning our
happen
debt is better, but you know what
because
that
us owning our debt is, to be quite, it is better than China. It,
there are
we
under
want as much as
unforeseen
possible. We want it as much as possible out of their hands.
there are unforeseen consequences with them doing that because they own a significant portion, more less than you'd think. Because they talk about China
Right.
buying all
Well,
it's, but it's only around 15%. I
people
want to
don't
say.
understand that a lot of our debt
Yeah,
right now is interest-based previous debt as well.
yeah, but that could have
Um,
ramifications for the dollar. Look,
right.
but if we can, if Doge actually takes effect and we do start to bring down our deficit. I'm not even talking about eliminating it, just reducing it from the previous years. We'd be in better shape. But we shall see. Uh,
Right. I do
last,
inspect, I don't know what they're gonna do on like the tax cuts and whatever. They were talking about tax
they need to
increases on
keep
the
it the same
highest
until they cut
bracket.
spending. Until they cut spending, they should just keep them as they are.
I think that's
Yeah.
what they're trying to level it out to. I did hear that Hegseth wants to increase our military budget up to 1 trillion because right now it's like what, 850 billion? Not bad.
Right.
I actually agree with that. Again, because China freaks me out so much, we need to make sure our military is as lethal as possible, and there are things that we need to update. So,
Okay.
and it also strengthens our leveraging position. FYI, people who are stupid and try to say we don't need to spend on our military. Yes, we fucking do.
Oh, we of course do. That's just those people are naive. I'm going to end with a personal, my Congresswoman Catherine Clark, who's like minority whip in the House, and
I do have
just
to say, recently she had like these awesome pair of earrings, and it really painfully hurt me
I,
to compliment
I
her on fashion.
I cannot stand this woman, and she's become a little bit
She's really
more.
annoying.
She's a little bit more. I won't say popular nowadays, but you're seeing a lot more of her because I
I
used
don't
to
think
try to
she's
put
that
her.
much popular.
Oh
I mean, like
God, but
Hakeem Jeffries is like cringe.
she is the out and out lies that come out of this woman's mouth, and I should say her Twitter account, but even when she's done press conferences, all this woman does is lie. Like, just they're cutting Social Security. Like, the one thing Donald Trump is absolutely not going to do is cut Social
I
Security.
mean, we might be cutting Social Security so that citizens of the United States benefit from it. So,
Yeah, but the thing is, it is baffling to me how nobody calls her out for these out and out lies, other than like just Republicans going, "You're lying," and It's just frustrating. She's my congresswoman. I can't stand her. She's terrible. Awful, 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 awful. And
I think
it's
it's hard for Boston. I mean, political commentators are not going to call her out on anything. I mean,
right,
we've said it before on this podcast. If the Boston Globe is calling out a Democrat, shit is hitting the fan for
right.
the party, and it is actually worse than you think.
So speaking of that, I think we might. I don't know anything else on trade war.
No, I mean, it's a wait and see. I am not against what's going on with China. I think it's great that oil's going down and fucking over Russia. Um, you know, I don't like really the rest of it on the other countries that are our allies, but it seems like they're gonna figure that out. I kind of trust Japan and South Korea. The EU needs to get its shit together per usual, because they just don't. I've actually been on the sidelines. I've been really mad at the EU lately based on them not being able to get together on Ukraine funding after they puffed out their chest after that Zelensky meeting in the Oval. That fell through, if you didn't know that, completely. They have not sent a dime since then. And then now Zelensky announced today that they were able to capture two Chinese soldiers that were fighting for Russia,
Mm,
which was also concerning to hear.
not North Korean soldiers, Chinese.
Chinese.
Wow.
That's actually very concerning because that
Yeah.
means that Russia and China are closer than ever right now, which has not been the case in the past. They're trusting
They've
each other
they've
more,
always
which
had
is
a weird
super,
relationship. There's some weird
yeah,
history there.
that they're trusting each other a lot. And that is really concerning to me because, again, China with a gas station attached to it is a little scarier than
Yeah.
what we previously thought.
All right. Anything else?
No, I hope everyone have a good week. Let's enjoy the show. Don't look at your 401k right now. Watch the stocks and laugh because eventually they'll go
Watch the
back up.
stocks,
Take it from a
and if you think
millennial
you have
like
a good
me.
no, buy if you see a good opportunity. That's the
Yeah,
point.
buy.
But
That's the other thing I keep telling people, like I just tell them to buy things all the time. But if it's stocks, I definitely buy the dip and keep
consider
it.
buying a dip and buy slowly, buy little pieces. Don't
Yeah,
go
no,
all in.
when people are like, no, I don't want to buy in this atmosphere, it's like, what are you talking about?
I've always made money on the dips. That's one thing I have always made money on the dips. I the firm.
I have been noticing a lot more retailers are coming out and doing a little bit of like push sales based on like what's happening in the economy right now. And
Hmm.
I'm seeing a little bit more push sales because they want to make that uh, quick money.
All
So
right.
we'll see what happens.
Well, let's hope deals are made. Let's make a deal. Art of the deal, Mr. President. Let's
Yeah.
get it going.
Get
Don't
it going.
no
If they
more.
cut a deal with Japan and South Korea, that would be big.
Yes. Domo arigato, Peter Retardo. Have a good night, everybody. Bye bye.
I guess.